Welcome to the AM Update, Week in Review. A collection of the best moments from Aaron McIntyre's morning update.
Malcolm Gladwell is a prolific author. Now, he is what some, I think, dumb people would maybe idealize as a genius. He's not a genius. He's just a very compelling storyteller, and he has some interesting things to say. One thing that I found interesting that he had to say recently, he spoke at a Wall Street Journal confab about why the prospect of all driverless vehicles is impossible. And it's for a really simple reason that I'm kicking myself I didn't think of. Listen to this.
Driverless cars in an urban setting don't work because they work too well, right? So what we went to Phoenix where they had Waymo. And I had my producer get in the Waymo, and I ran alongside the Waymo. And I would cut the Waymo off, and the Waymo, of course, because it's got like 58 sensors, would stop instantly, right? And then I would run circles around the Waymo, and the Waymo would sit there patiently waiting for me to get out of the way. And I realized if every car on the road is a driverless car, then there is no penalty whatsoever to pedestrians misbehaving. If you're a kid, why don't 11-year-old boys play soccer on the streets on 42nd Street in Manhattan? Because they're going to get hit by a car and killed. But if every car is a Waymo, they're all going to stop and they're going to wait there for hours until you finish their game. The Waymo is, so the whole point of deterrence, the reason deterrence with human drivers work is that the driver will make a mistake and kill you inadvertently. Waymo will not make a mistake. People are always saying the problem with driverless cars is they'll make mistakes. No. They don't make mistakes, and that's the problem.
That is such a patently obvious observation that we cannot have all driverless cars because it will incentivize poor behavior from pedestrians. I'm kicking myself. I didn't think of that. It's not because they're going to make mistakes. It's because they will prioritize not making mistakes. Such a simple truth. All driverless cars are not in the future. And
You're listening to the AM Update, Week in Review. Follow on X and Instagram at RealAMUpdate.
if you listen to my interview with Dr. Calvin Beisner, I teased this question at the end of that interview. I asked, when it comes to the global warming debate, what is the argument we're actually having? This came to my mind because during the course of that interview, I heard Dr. Beisner say a couple of times that yes, we're ceding that global warming can be caused by human behavior, but it's negligible at best. Now, I know Dr. Beisner. I've booked him, and it's been a long time since I've booked him on any shows. His whole priority and his organization's entire priority is economics. And what it actually, if I could put the thesis of his organization, is that cheap, abundant energy really is the best predictor of human liberty, human ingenuity, human freedom. That's basically the thesis, if I could boil it down to one little thing. So I'm not really worried about him. I know where he's coming from. But it surprised me nonetheless that he's ceding that now, because I don't recall the last time I'd really paid close attention to his work, him actually ceding that argument. He does believe that human beings can contribute to global warming, but it's just negligible. So it prompted a question in my mind. What is this debate really about? Maybe I'm late to the party here, but it always seemed to me like the debate we were trying to have, if we were having this debate at all on the right, and as I articulated during that interview, we usually just dismiss the Greta Thunbergs, rightfully so, because they've just become cartoonish and clowns and we're not actually having a debate. They're just emotionally blackmailing us, and that's it. That's basically what's coming from the green crazies. But when it comes to the actual science, we're not having a debate. We're not having a debate about global warming and what contributes to it. We're really not. The debate that we're actually having is, who is this planet for? Was this planet created for us, or were we created for the planet? The biblical worldview says the planet was created for us. Therefore, we must prioritize human flourishing. See, I think that's the debate we're actually having here. And I think their side actually has recognized that. And they're happy to have who contributes to global warming because it actually obfuscates their meta argument. They're on the side of we're here for the Earth. That's their argument. And so, of course, all of their solutions are going to be to the benefit, allegedly, of planet Earth and to the detriment of humans. We're parasites. That's the meta debate that they're having. Well, we have been over here trying to have who actually contributes. Can we actually contribute to global warming? So that wasn't the first question that I asked. The second question I want to ask is this, and I'm still making my mind up on this. Is it worth it to cede the point that yes, humans contribute to global warming, if and only if it means we get to have the argument that we're actually having that I just articulated? That this is not really a debate about global warming. It's a debate about who we are as humans and what this planet is for. Is it for us or are we for the planet? So is it worth it to cede that point in order to have the actual argument that I think the left has been having and they've been dominating on for the last generation? And they're happy to do any other obfuscations in order to hide the argument that they're actually having. Is it worth it to cede that we are contributing to global warming? Or is that a non-starter? I'm still making my mind up about that. Let me know at Real AM Update what you think. Tucker Carlson went through the big Turning Point USA conference over the weekend. I listened to his entire talk and his Q&A. And let me just say, that was a wild ride. That was a wild ride. Now he's got Bill Ackman, the billionaire investor, just, I think, probably at the a click away from maybe filing a defamation lawsuit. Tucker Carlson has apparently multiple times accused Ackman of manipulating markets to his gain. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. I wanted to focus in on one clip where Carlson talks about conservatives or right-wingers taking unearned victory laps. Listen to this.
If you deny people what they actually want long enough and instead substitute things that you claim they should want, like bombing Iran, I'm not for Iran, where you spend all day telling me that it's so important that, boys not playing girls' soccer teams, whatever. I agree. I hate the tranny stuff passionately. I think you should keep the boys off girls' soccer teams. But I don't know. It kind of feels like you're feeding me appetizers. At some point, I want to look around and see a better country. I want to see a country I recognize. I don't want to see people sleeping on the sidewalk. I don't see people ODing on drugs. I want to know where those drugs coming from. Why can't you stop it? You've got the U.S. military. Don't you have SEAL Team 6? What are they doing today? Don't you have Delta Force? You could give me another segment about how impressive the U.S. military is? I believe you. Why aren't they employed to make my country better? Why are my cities disgusting? I don't even want to go there. It smells like weed and halal food. And you're lecturing me about how it's a great moral victory that I kicked the boys off the girls' soccer team? Good, I'm so glad. But let's do the real stuff, like making New York livable. And create an economy where my kids can have kids. How about this? How about we just make the measure really super simple? Can my children have without the benefit of the great luck I have had, can they have a roughly approximate life that I had? Or how about just a middle class life? Can they get married young, as I did, and have 4 kids and, take a couple jobs, work hard and all that stuff? But in the end, it's fine. Can they do that? Or is that so remote a possibility that you need to tell me that Iran is the real threat to take my mind off the fact that you stole all the money and screwed up my country beyond recognition?
And finally, air analysis, slightly acidic, mostly necessary. Here's Tucker Carlson at Turning Point USA's big annual event in Tampa, Florida. He said a lot of things I agree with, some things I find interesting, and other things that I find a little bit icky. But Tucker Carlson, love him or hate him, he does have a tendency most of the time to speak his mind. And I do think most of what he says, it seems like to me, just coming up, again, I don't know his soul, I'm not God. It seems like he just says what he really believes. You may not like it. You may not like why he believes what he believes, why he's coming to conclusions that he comes to. But I do genuinely think he's genuine with what he says. He just speaks his mind. Now, I want to focus in on the part where he talks about kicking the boys off the girls' soccer team. And while he agrees with that, he hates the tranny stuff, and he thinks these are legitimate victories, he doesn't see these as real wins. Might I submit respectfully that if civilization can't get right what is a boy and what is a girl, we're not going to be able to fix the drug crisis. We're not going to be able to fix the economy. We're not going to be able to fix our cities. We're not going to be able to actually focus on the things what Tucker Carlson says are real issues. We're not going to have an economy where our children can have children and a life. If we can't get the fundamental building blocks of civilization correct, we're not going to get any of the other things correct. What is a man? What is a woman? However, what I'd also say, it's a little bit more complicated than that at the same time. I've had this conversation with somebody I know very well on a couple of different occasions recently. I would like to also submit this. I think very soon, if it's not here already, the transgender stuff is going to actually become a mark of the destitute, a mark of the lower socioeconomic statuses. We typically think that the trans stuff is just these TikTok influencers and people who are maybe higher up who can afford this level of delusion. I think very soon, it's actually, if it's not here already, you're going to see trans going down in places like where J.D. Vance grew up. You're going to see that phenomenon pop up more and more in lower socioeconomic status places. Why is that? The degradation of American morals directly coincides with the degradation of American middle-class economics. Yes, more people are getting more rich in this country than it was 50 years ago, but still, that also means that the lower class, the poorer people, there's more poor people as well. You can't just have one segment of the population, the vast majority of the population, be super rich or super poor. That's what made America so exceptional, is that we had this huge middle class where you could really own a home and have a family on one income. And we had that for a long time. And now it's not really there anymore. What happened, I believe, when the Rust Belt started rusting, we started shipping out all of these jobs to Mexico, across the ponds, whichever direction you want to choose. Is that while, yes, the people in those areas started turning to drugs, started turning to alcohol, and I think very soon we'll start turning to the trans lifestyle. Yes, they are responsible for their own actions, but at the same time, their descent into moral decay and rot was aided and abetted by the very people that Tucker Carlson is talking about here. So I'm not going to put words in Tucker Carlson's mouth, but I think there is a direct connection between the moral rot and decay of the United States and the moral rot and decay of the middle class. And that moral rot and decay of the middle class economically was directly aided and abetted by the forces that Tucker Carlson is talking about, all for a quick buck. If you go back and listen to his entire speech, he is melding left-wing populist talking points and right-wing populist talking points together. And my grand conclusion, after all of this kind of ramble, don't count him out for 2028. I saw Chris Rufo post this yesterday, and I kind of want to read it as an introduction to air analysis today. This is an excerpt from Richard Nixon's book, In the Arena, where he describes his view of the 60s. This is Richard Nixon, In the Arena, talking about the 1960s. Quote, "In the 60s, schools became a social and cultural wasteland. In college, curricular decisions were held hostage to student demonstrators who thought they knew better than teachers and the administrators what and how young people should learn. In high school, Educators and students seemed to spend more time arguing about smoking areas, hair length, and hemlines than they did about teaching and learning. In elementary school, students became guinea pigs for the latest theoretical crazes imported from Washington. In the confusion, the fundamental mission of education was lost. Before the 60s, the job of education was to help students become productive members of society. Good schooling was prepared for them for the responsibilities of having jobs and families. But during the 60s, the very idea of having jobs and families was judged to be hopelessly banal, even corrupt. It became the job of education to mold students into culturally and politically correct citizens of some ideal world that existed only in the brain of the ideologue or theoretician. It became racist to teach Shakespeare to Hispanic children, racist to teach traditional English to inner city black children, racist not to teach white children Latin American literature, or not to teach non-English speaking children in their own language. Competition was ruled to be dangerous, so grades were tossed out at many colleges to be replaced by pass or fail, and competitive sports were frowned upon. Standard tests were judged to be racist, sexist, or both. That is an excerpt of Richard Nixon in his book, In the Arena, describing his view of the 1960s. First thing is, Richard Nixon did nothing wrong. I've just become thoroughly convinced of that now. I first heard the idea that Richard Nixon was maybe misjudged probably about 5, 6, 7 years ago. And now, when you take it into the totality of what we have seen Washington, D.C. become, especially with the way that they have treated President Trump and all of the hoaxes that they have tried to pull on him, most notably, it's just in the news today, what the deep state has tried to do with him, the parallels between Richard Nixon, populist, winging conservative, and Donald Trump, populist, some conservative instincts. The parallels between those two figures are incredible. So there's that. I think, I really just believe Richard Nixon has been, he was railroaded. He was railroaded upon further review. Secondly, what does this have to do with grading the Trump administration? Everything. The linchpin of a dysfunctional society is always going to be in education. Now, what do I mean by functional? Okay, I don't mean the secularization. Ultimately, your spiritual health is always going to be indicative or predictive of societal success at large. That's always going to be the case. But I'm just talking about, can we have literate people? And I don't just mean people who can read or write, people who understand financial literacy, people who understand how to fix things, how to have jobs, how to have families, people who have marketable skills. That's what I mean by functional. The linchpin of a dysfunctional society is dysfunctional education. And this is Richard Nixon. What you just heard, Richard Nixon was describing the 1960s, which was 60 plus years ago now. A lot of water under the bridge. In fact, the water for some of the intervening time has come over the bridge. And so I think you need to take that perspective, especially during this, most recent time, especially when it comes to the disappointment with the DOJ, FBI, Epstein, how that's been messaged, how that's been handled. I think it's really important to reset the big picture here. Just what Trump and his administration is up against. It's a fundamental dysfunctional society. Linchpin, of course, is education, and President Trump is trying to deal with that, among other issues. So taken from a 10,000-foot view, how would I grade the Trump presidency so far? I'd grade it an A. I really would. And I'm talking about the second Trump administration so far. 6 months in. I would grade it an A. The only thing keeping it from being an A+, and maybe I should go a lower grade, is the Department of Justice, the FBI. That has just been a major black eye. A major black eye. You know what? I'm kind of talking myself into an A- or B+ now that I'm talking about this out loud. So B+ at worst, A at best, very best. It's kind of like if you take the SAT or ACT and you're really, really good at English, you're really, really good at science, biology. I don't know if that's the subject. It's been a long time since I've taken the ACT. But you're really good at everything except for like one segment of like algebra or something like that. And that just brings down your entire score. That's kind of what the DOJ is. And what's so inexplicable and unexplainable is why it's been taking so long to like get any action. I mean, this Obama stuff with the Russia collusion narrative, it's a good start, but all it is so far is just a start. What's so frustrating about this is there's no real good answer why it's taking so long to get any information about holding people accountable for their crimes. There's tons of prima facie evidence, and I know prima facie is just prima facie. It's not real hard evidence. But you would have thought maybe I need some better education. You would have thought by now we would have gotten somebody in handcuffs. Okay, make fun of Alina Habba all you want. She's one of the only people in Trump's administration, in Trump's circle, to put somebody in handcuffs. First, it was the Newark mayor, and then it was the congresswoman from New Jersey. She's one of the only people to put an elected official in handcuffs, and that was for disrupting that ICE detention facility. But that has been the biggest black eye or bruise on the second Trump administration so far. The glacial pace the Department of Justice and all of its tentacles have been up to in terms of holding people from the previous administrations accountable for their actions, holding out hope that they can reverse course and right the ship.
You're listening to the AM Update, Week in Review. Follow on X and Instagram at Real AM Update.
All right, let's talk about our poll of the week. I asked you, what do you think we should grade the Trump administration? What is the grade of the Trump administration? Gave you 4 options, kind of made them polarizing as possible. Here are the results. In 4th place, F-, 3.1%. Say the Trump administration has deserved an F-. In 2nd place, a fail at 6.3%. In 3rd place, A+ at 20.3%. And in 1st place, pass. Just a pass-fail exercise at 70.3%. Apologies for the noise in the background. We've got a very squeaky toy at my feet. All right, let's go to some of your responses. Scampy Coco says, pass with a C. Outside of immigration, it's not looking good. Some poor decisions as the support of President Ahmad al-Sharaa and not, that's the new Syrian president, and not acknowledging the Syrian Druze and Christian massacre, not demanding Congress and Senate enact the DOJ cuts and recommendations. Add to that the non-support and resistance of the Congress and Senate to pass his agenda. They're slow-walking all of his appointees. Why? It's a repeat of his first term. Well, Scampy, I guess if you're going with the total results, but a lot of what you just said there, outside of recognition of the Syrian Druze and Christian massacre, that's all Congress stuff. That's stuff that President Trump can't directly control. But if you're just grading regardless and you're just being a tough grader, then I understand how you got to that conclusion. Henry Reardon says the fumbling of Epstein, the increased spending, and the money and weapons to Ukraine really hurt the second half of these first 6 months. The fumbling of this Obama scandal will likely seal the deal. Here's the thing, Henry, they cannot fumble this. This can't just be talking points and some red meat. Can't be that. You can't send your director of national intelligence out there and allege treasonous activity from the former president 2 presidents ago, Barack Obama, and then not arrest anybody. Foximus Maximus says it would have been an A+ if not for the Epstein files cluster. That's kind of where I am. Be Happy says B+. They have had a couple of missteps. Charles says A+, comparing my expectations to current reality. Hey, Charles, ray of sunshine. I appreciate that. And finally, Jim, the lack of accountability for pretty much anything, his abysmal endorsements across the board, and his attacks on decent guys like Massey and Paul, and refusal to ignore the courts bring his performance from a solid A to a B for me. I voted pass. So how did I vote in this? Because I don't give him an A+, but I don't think it's a failure either. I voted pass as well.
This has been the AM Update Week in Review. The AM Update will be back on Monday and every weekday at 4 a.m. Eastern Time.